Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight you have been volunteered to join the ranks of the Vikings. That means cold mornings, smoky longhouses and far too many bowls of porridge. We'll stumble through pillages, feasts and general chaos, all while pretending we know what we're doing. Before we get going, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss one of my videos. Also, drop a comment down below and let me know what you think your favorite part of Viking life would be. Now settle in, take a deep breath and close your eyes and let's get going. You wake up to a sensation that is, frankly, unpleasantly specific. Dampness. Not the kind of dampness you encounter when you leave your laundry in the machine for slightly too long, but a pervasive, seeping kind that seems determined to infiltrate every layer of clothing you own. The air itself is cold, a sharp nasal prickling cold that makes you reconsider the series of choices that somehow led you here. Choices like, for example, wandering too close to that shimmering light in the woods last night, or trusting that suspiciously friendly merchant in town who said, "No, really, you'll love the cultural experience." And here you are, in a Viking settlement. You take a deep, cautious breath. The air is a curious mixture of pine, sea salt, and something that smells like a mixture of smoke, unwashed wool, and possibly fermented herring. You assume this is what home smells like in the 9th century. You know nothing of the people. Here and yet somehow you feel entirely surrounded. The settlement is small but unmistakably alive. Longhouses, their wooden frames weathered and darkened by years of wind and rain, cluster around a central open area. Smoke curls from the chimneys, winding lazily into the sky like tendrils of someone's very bad daydreams. The scent of burning. Wood is so strong that it briefly masks the fish, but only briefly. You catch a whiff of something salty and undeniably fishy, and immediately question whether this is what passes for breakfast, or perhaps lunch, or maybe just ambient aroma. Hammering echoes through the morning air. A rhythmic clanging that could either be the construction of a new longship or the persistent frustration of someone attempting to drive a nail into stone. You glance toward the source and see a man you are fairly certain is named Olaf, standing on what may or may not be a pile of lumber, yelling instructions to people whose response is indistinguishable from panic. You suspect he owns a lot of axes and that he takes them very seriously. A child runs past you barefoot, carrying what appears to be a slightly terrified chicken. You consider the logistics of explaining to a modern veterinarian why a chicken looks like it's auditioning for a Viking-themed horror movie, but you wisely keep your mouth shut. You note that the child seems utterly unconcerned by the ethics of animal transport. A villager notices you. Perhaps it's the way your clothes hang, wet and shapeless, or maybe the look of bewildered defeat on your face. Either way, they greet you with alarming enthusiasm. "Ah, you have arrived. Excellent. You will be one of us." You pause, blinking. "One of you?" "Yes," they reply. "You have been volunteered for the community, to live, to work, to survive." You notice the emphasis on survive and begin to reconsider the appeal of modern life. The comfort of running water, the security of knowing that the largest predators in your area are either feral raccoons or mildly aggressive squirrels, suddenly seems remarkably inviting. But it's too late for regrets. You have been volunteered. Apparently consent is a rather fluid concept in the 9th century. The villager waves you forward, gesturing at a longhouse that smells faintly of smoke, boiled cabbage, and whatever it is that smells like someone forgot to sweep the floor for approximately 7 weeks. You follow, trying to appear confident, which is mostly a series of awkward shuffles. Confidence is difficult to maintain when every surface is suspiciously sticky and your boots make a wet sucking noise with every step. You are introduced to your new home for the foreseeable future. The interior is dim, warmed by a central fire pit whose smoke exits through a hole in the roof. The furnishings are minimal: wooden benches, a table scarred by generations of ill-considered meals, and a sleeping area that consists largely of straw and fur. You do not yet understand how anyone manages to sleep here without becoming intimately acquainted with every insect in the northern hemisphere. You meet some of your new companions. There is a stout man named Bjorn who stares at you as if calculating the odds of your survival. There is a woman, her hair a tangled crown of practicality and annoyance, who offers you a nod that could either mean welcome or prepare to die. And there is a goat. The goat does not offer any nods. It looks at you with a kind of philosophical suspicion that somehow makes you feel judged. You assume that is fair. Your introduction is interrupted by Olaf, who has apparently located another axe and is demonstrating proper swinging technique to someone who looks entirely unwilling. He shouts precision, power, passion, and swings his weapon with alarming gusto. You dodge instinctively, which seems unnecessary, and yet somehow you sense that dodging was, in fact, the correct move. The narrator, that's me, quietly, guiding you through this experience, reassures you that it is perfectly survivable. You might encounter raiding parties, frostbite, bears, and occasional culinary experiments that defy explanation, but you will likely live. Perhaps not elegantly, perhaps not with dignity, perhaps with a constant lingering question of why you were chosen for this life, but survive you will. You notice a cart being wheeled by a group of villagers. Its contents are mysterious, wrapped in burlap, and possibly the results of last night's fishing expedition. You watch as one of them accidentally drops a particularly slippery fish. There is a brief, tragic flopping before it lands on the ground with an undeniable splat. Olaf shouts something unintelligible, possibly praise, possibly admonishment. You are unsure, but you nod sagely, as is customary. A dog trots past you. Its fur is matted, its tail held high in what you can only interpret as canine smugness. It sniffs at your boots, seems unimpressed, and moves on. You realize that in this world, animals are not pets in the modern sense. They are small, judgmental witnesses to your very existence. You step outside, taking in the settlement more fully. Smoke rises from several longhouses, curling and twisting against the cold morning sky. A thin mist hangs over the fjord, lending everything a dreamlike quality that you suspect might also be slightly horrifying. You can see the distant hills, the water, and the forest beyond. There is a raw beauty here, undeniably, even if it smells faintly of unwashed wool and salted fish. You take another breath of the crisp Nordic air. Pine, sea salt, smoke, and, faintly, fermented herring. Ah, home. A villager hands you a simple breakfast. Porridge, presumably made of oats and determination, and a small slab of something you hope is cheese. You nibble politely, considering the texture, the flavor, and your life choices in general. The porridge is bland, which is to say it is exactly what you expected. The cheese is faintly tangy, which is to say it is exactly what you deserve. Olaf appears again, this time demonstrating a slightly different technique with his axe, which he calls the northern sweep. You watch from a safe distance, realizing that if you pay close attention, you can learn absolutely nothing. You make a mental note to continue pretending competence while quietly hoping no one notices. You are informed that chores must be done today. Chopping wood, mending nets, sweeping the longhouse floor, and occasionally yelling at a goat that seems to know too much. It is a full day of work in the life of a Viking. Difficult, often dangerous, but undeniably authentic. You resolve, in your own mind, that this is what life is like for people who truly appreciate the subtle art of survival. Despite the chaos, there is a rhythm to the settlement. The clanging of hammers, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional shout of "Oi!" It all blends into a pattern that is somehow comforting in its own rugged way. You recognize that the people here, for all their eccentricities and alarming enthusiasm for axes, are organized, focused, and surprisingly welcoming, in a terrifying, axe-wielding kind of way. The narrator quietly points out, with mild amusement, that you are still very much alive. Not only that, but you are part of this world now, whether you like it or not. You have been volunteered. You have been handed a wooden spoon, a straw bed, and a vague sense of purpose. And if you don't get eaten by a bear, frozen to a tree, or accidentally insult someone's beard, you might even enjoy yourself. You take one more careful look around the settlement. Smoke rises, waves lap against the shore, and Olaf is somewhere shouting again about axes. The villagers move with purpose, the goat chews thoughtfully, and somewhere faintly the hammering continues, and you realize with a strange mixture of dread and reluctant admiration that you are a Viking now, in the 9th century, cold, damp and entirely unprepared, but still very much alive. Ah, home. The longhouse assigned to you is, in the words of someone who clearly lied on a leaflet somewhere, quaint and rustic. In reality, it is simultaneously too smoky and too cold. Smoke curls insistently from the hearth, stinging your eyes and making your sinuses question their life choices, while a draught snakes under the door and through the cracks in the walls, producing a kind of bone-deep chill that feels almost personal. You take a step inside and immediately question whether this structure is meant to shelter you or merely test your patience. Inside, the longhouse smells of wood smoke, unwashed wool, and a faint but unmistakable undertone of something you hope is cheese, but are not willing to investigate too closely. The floor is covered in straw, the same straw that might have once been fresh and comforting, but has long since surrendered to the combined forces of centuries of feet, mud, and small, vaguely alarming insects. You lower yourself gingerly onto the bed area, discovering that straw is simultaneously firm, scratchy, and inexplicably aggressive. You adjust your position and immediately regret it. Your housemates make themselves known in the most dramatic ways. There is a family of 5, each of whom seems determined to assert some form of dominance over the other. The father is carving something that might be wood, or possibly a particularly tough herring. The mother is muttering instructions at children who are clearly ignoring her, and the children themselves appear to have discovered a unique combination of curiosity and chaos that involves climbing, tripping, and occasionally launching small objects at the walls. Then there is the grandmother. She sits in the corner of the room, upright and entirely still. Whether she is awake, asleep, or a highly realistic statue is impossible to determine. You consider cautiously greeting her, but decide against it. One wrong word, one accidental sneeze, and you may have inadvertently offended her entire lineage. And of course there is a goat. Her goat that stares at you with the kind of philosophical disdain normally reserved for cats, and some particularly judgmental strangers on public transportation. You make the mistake of offering it a small portion of your lunch, which consists entirely of what you hope is slightly edible porridge, and the goat nibbles delicately before trotting away, clearly unimpressed. You note mentally that perhaps this is a metaphor for your life here. After introductions, such as they are, you are expected to contribute. The concept of contribution is somewhat vague, but it involves moving about the longhouse, observing what others are doing and attempting not to break anything. Your skills are mild sarcasm and not dying, neither of which seems particularly useful in the context of medieval Scandinavian survival. Nonetheless, you muster a kind of semi-competent enthusiasm and proceed. The first practical task is sleeping. You realize, after approximately 5 minutes of attempting to lie on straw, that it is a material designed by someone with an intense and personal grudge against comfort. Every movement produces a crackle of straw that feels as if it is mocking you. Every lump is a new obstacle, and every stray piece presses insistently into your skin. You try to arrange the furs over yourself, achieving at best a vaguely protective layer, though you suspect the goats might have already claimed part of it as territory. Breakfast is porridge. You approach the table with cautious optimism, which is swiftly undermined when you take a spoonful. The porridge is bland, not bland in the modern, polite sense, but in the medieval, survivalist sense. It tastes faintly of oats, faintly of water, and faintly of regret. You eat politely, trying not to scowl, while a small child gleefully launches a cube of butter at their sibling, which lands on the floor and immediately disappears, likely eaten by the goat, which is clearly the household's moral arbiter. You attempt to make conversation with your fellow housemates. The father is carving something that may or may not be useful. The mother is delegating chores in a tone that suggests both exhaustion and subtle threat. And Bjorn, yes, Bjorn, the man whose glare could curdle milk, watches you with an intensity that is at once terrifying and oddly disapproving. You avoid his gaze, looking instead at the floor, the ceiling, and occasionally the goat, which, again, seems to judge you silently. Chores are next. chopping wood, tending the fire, and mending nets. You take up the axe only to realize that your grip is all wrong, your stance is entirely incorrect, and the wood itself seems unusually resistant. You swing, the axe wobbles in your hands, and you narrowly avoid decapitating a small piece of furniture. Olaf would have been proud of your failure. You try again, adjusting your grip, reminding yourself that in theory no one expects much from a new recruit, and yet somehow you feel that you are constantly being evaluated by the collective eyes of Viking scrutiny. You carry the chopped wood to the fire, careful not to spill anything, and pause to take in the room. The fire crackles, smoke drifts upward, and everyone is moving with a kind of organized chaos that makes your head spin. Children are arguing over who gets to swing the smaller axe the goat is attempting to climb onto a bench, and the grandmother remains, as ever, silently upright, watching with unknowable intent. You are beginning to suspect that survival in this household involves a combination of luck, deception, and the ability to look useful without actually contributing anything that could be considered skill. Lunch is another serving of porridge, this time slightly colder, slightly more congealed, and slightly more regret-inducing. You try to spice it up by adding a few herbs from a small pot in the corner, only to discover that they are not herbs, but something considerably less appetizing. Possibly dried seaweed, possibly moss, definitely something with questionable taste. You eat politely, nodding at everyone and trying to avoid making faces that would draw Bjorn's ire. The day proceeds in a kind of slow, exhausting rhythm. Tasks are assigned, tasks are attempted, and tasks are occasionally abandoned when you realize that not everything is worth the effort. You sweep, you haul water, you feed the goat who does not acknowledge your efforts, and you try desperately to appear competent while mostly failing. The narrator, calm and unflappable, offers observations about how Viking life builds character, even if you feel with each passing hour that your character is mostly composed of anxiety and a mild sense of inadequacy. By mid-afternoon you begin to notice a pattern. Smoke rises from the hearth, curling into your eyes. The children continue to engage in activities that can only loosely be called play, often resulting in small injuries and loud protests. Bjorn moves silently through the room, eyes glinting, like a predator evaluating prey. You step carefully, aware that any misstep could result in either mild embarrassment or physical harm. You attempt to help with dinner preparations, only to realize that the concept of dinner here is as flexible as time itself. Meat is roasted over the fire, vegetables are added when convenient, and seasoning is applied with a generous hand and possibly some mild superstition. You chop, stir, and balance utensils as best you can, achieving a level of competence that you cautiously describe to yourself as adequate. As evening falls, the longhouse becomes warmer, though not without cost. Smoke lingers and your eyes water with the combined effects of soot and mild terror at the efficiency of Viking cooking techniques. The goat curls up in a corner, clearly smug about the distribution of straw. The grandmother remains upright, serene and possibly judging, though it is impossible to know. You sit by the fire, reflecting on the day. You have eaten, moved, and avoided serious bodily harm, accomplishments that feel oddly heroic, given your complete lack of preparation for this life. You are still alive, still uninjured beyond minor cuts and scrapes, and, for reasons you do not fully understand, part of this household now. Your skills, sarcasm and not dying, have served you admirably. Night falls, the longhouse quiets, and you watch the fire flicker. Children are asleep, mostly. The goat has found a strategic patch of straw, and the grandmother is as still as ever. You realize with some satisfaction that the first day of Viking life is, against all odds, survivable, and yet somehow you suspect that this is only the beginning. Dawn breaks over the fjord, painting the water in shades of silver and grey that are almost beautiful, if you do not look too closely at the debris floating alongside the occasional, slightly alarming plank of wood. The sky is pale and cold, like someone has taken a particularly damp sheet and held it up to the horizon. The air is crisp, tinged with sea salt, and that vague, indefinable smell of fish that survived the night better than you did. You stand in the doorway of your longhouse, stretching with all the grace of a small, mildly clumsy bear. Across the settlement, other Vikings are already moving. Someone hammers, someone shouts, someone whistles in a tone that suggests either joy or imminent disaster. You are uncertain which. A horn blares somewhere in the distance, cutting through the morning air with the subtlety of a charging boar. It is intended to signal the beginning of the day. It signals, more accurately, the beginning of panic. You take a deep breath and remind yourself that you are technically surviving. You have survived the first day. You have survived the first night. You have not yet been eaten by a goat, trampled, by a child, or accidentally decapitated by Olaf, though all remain distinct possibilities. Today, you tell yourself, will be no worse. It could, in fact, be slightly better. Breakfast has been dispatched. Porridge, slightly less congealed than yesterday, accompanied by a small mysterious lump of meat that may be bacon or may be something more adventurous. You eat quickly, politely, and with a mild sense of trepidation, while trying not to glance at Bjorn, whose gaze seems to follow you with unnerving precision. You wonder briefly whether your ability to look busy without actually accomplishing anything will serve you today. It is not a comforting thought. Outside, the village stirs with purpose. Axes are sharpened, nets are mended, and the smell of smoke from the longhouses mingles with the briny scent of the fjord. You attempt to fit in first task, chopping wood. You pick up an axe, a solid, heavy, probably historically accurate axe, and survey the pile of logs. You swing once. The axe swings back, you step back, the log remains stubbornly whole. A draw, really. Undeterred, you try again. This time you adjust your stance. Your arms ache instantly. The axe wobbles alarmingly, veering slightly to the left, and you catch yourself just before embarrassing your newfound housemates. Olaf appears at your shoulder, offers a brief nod of encouragement, which, in his case, resembles the brief nod of a shark, and leaves, presumably to terrorize someone else. You imagine that historically this is considered training. You hope he is right. After approximately 17 swings, all of which produced either bruises, minor splinters, or both, you step back and admire your handiwork. The pile of wood remains mostly intact, though you have succeeded in flattening one particularly stubborn rock. You chalk this up to progress. The narrator, ever calm, notes that survival in the 9th century involves a delicate balance of effort, luck, and pretending that small victories count for something. You nod, secretly grateful for the advice. Next, fishing. You follow a small group of villagers to the fjord. The water glistens in the morning light, reflecting the slow rhythmic motion of the waves. Gulls wheel overhead, calling in tones that suggest either curiosity or judgment. You are not yet certain which. A fishing net is thrust into your hands. You pretend familiarity. You do not have it. You flail slightly, tangling both yourself and the net in what could generously be described as a messy aquatic dance. A villager nearby laughs, a warm, approving sound, though the laughter seems tinged with disbelief. You wonder if your ancestors were like this, casually failing at everything and yet still somehow surviving. You reflect briefly that you do not care for genealogy at this precise moment. Eventually, after much effort, tangled netting, and several small threats from nearby seagulls, you succeed in catching a single fish. It is small, alive, and seems to regard you with an expression that could only be described as deep disappointment. You release it immediately. The villagers nod politely, as if this was part of the plan all along. You tell yourself it was. You wander back toward the settlement, fishless but victorious, and attempt to understand Viking humor. A group of men discuss something that appears to involve the misadventures of a goat, a hammer, and a mispronounced name. You laugh at the correct moment, nod at the appropriate intervals, and avoid eye contact with Bjorn. You feel vaguely competent. Back in the village, chores continue. Some carry firewood, others tend animals. You attempt to appear useful, balancing a bucket of water, while stepping carefully over a particularly aggressive piece of straw. You consider the practicality of modern life briefly. Hot showers, soft beds, the possibility of ordering something you like to eat and receiving it without any screaming, shouting, or risk of splinters. You push the thought aside. This is history, live and vivid, and you are part of it, technically. At one point, you try to clean a small area of the longhouse. The broom is rudimentary, the straw floor is uncooperative, and you realize that cleaning in the 9th century involves a certain degree of futility. Dust and debris return with alarming speed, and you spend 10 minutes wondering if the entire household is actively conspiring against you. The goat observes silently from a safe distance, its expression one of profound judgment. By mid-morning, you are called to the central yard. There, a pile of axes gleams in the pale sun, each one terrifying in its own subtle way. Today you are told the axe will be your instrument of both productivity and cultural assimilation. You pick one up, again trying to appear competent. You swing once, the axe swings back. You step back. A draw, really. The villagers cheer anyway. You realize that in Viking culture, effort, display, and proximity to violence count for more than accuracy. You nod sagely and offer a small bow of acknowledgement. Bjorn narrows his eyes. You quickly look elsewhere, wishing the earth would open and swallow you, or at least provide some plausible excuse to leave the yard. Later, you accompany a group to check traps along the shoreline. The sound of waves lapping against the fjord is steady, rhythmic, oddly calming, despite the fact that one misstep could result in soaking, minor injury, or unwanted attention from an especially territorial gull. You observe your companions moving, with practiced ease, while you stumble occasionally, mumbling apologies that are, thankfully, largely ignored. You catch a small crab in one hand and wonder if this counts as food. The villagers nod. You decide it does. The morning continues, in a kind of organized chaos. Chopping, hauling, fishing, cleaning, and avoiding Bjorn fill your hours. You manage to participate without serious injury, though you acquire several minor scrapes, a suspicious bruise on your shoulder, and a lingering sense that your hands are permanently sticky with a combination of wood sap, water, and unknown substances. Lunchtime arrives. You eat again, porridge supplemented with dried fish, and find it marginally more satisfying than yesterday, though only because your expectations have been lowered appropriately. You exchange glances with the goat, which appears equally unimpressed by the meal. It is a silent, mutual acknowledgement of survival in a world that is simultaneously harsh and oddly charming. In the early afternoon, you attempt a final round of chopping. You approach a particularly stubborn log, grip the axe with determination and swing. The axe swings back. You step aside. A draw, really. Olaf nods. You nod. Bjorn watches. You breathe carefully and move away, considering the practical merits of diplomacy, evasion, and strategic distraction. By the time the sun is higher in the sky, you are sweaty, tired, and vaguely proud of the fact that you have survived the morning without serious injury. You have chopped wood, caught a fish, and managed to understand or at least pretend to understand, a series of complicated Viking jokes. You have, in essence, become a minor part of the settlement's functioning machinery. The fjord glimmers. Under the afternoon light, gulls wheel lazily overhead, and the rhythmic clink of tools continues around you. There is an unexpected beauty in the chaos. The smell of pine and salt, the occasional breeze brushing across your damp clothing, the satisfaction of completing a task, however minor, without injury. You glance at Bjorn, who has thankfully wandered off to another, hopefully less dangerous task. You reflect on your accomplishments, standing upright, moving with some degree of coordination, catching a small crab, surviving the axe exercises, and not insulting anyone's beard. These are the victories that count in Viking life. You nod quietly to yourself and for a brief moment allow a tiny, cautious smile. You are surviving. Perhaps not gracefully, perhaps not elegantly, but surviving nonetheless. And so the morning continues, a mixture of work, hazard, humor, and the endless rhythm of life by the fjord. You take up your axe once more, consider the fish you released, and ponder the strange, exhausting, exhilarating reality that you have been accepted into. This world, however improbably, you swing, the axe swings back, a draw really. The morning begins with the peculiar sensation of being gently, though firmly, corralled by someone who appears entirely unbothered by your general confusion. This is Rurik, a local warrior of the kind who seems to have been carved out To have solid oak, with a beard that could double as a small forest, and eyes that suggest he knows exactly how inept you are, but is willing to let you survive for the sake of his own amusement. Rurik announces, in tones of calm authority, that today you will learn the ways of the North, specifically Norse mythology. You nod sagely, attempting to appear attentive, though your mind immediately drifts to the pressing question of how one survives in a world with sharp tools, uneven floors, and goats whose philosophical judgment is absolute. The gods are introduced to you in quick succession. Odin, the wise, who apparently sacrificed an eye for knowledge, and is a master of long, confusing speeches. Thor, the strong, wielding a hammer so large that it seems inconvenient, yet undeniably impressive. Loki, the trickster, who appears to specialize in chaos, mischief, and occasionally ruining everyone's day just for sport. And Freya, who in your understanding is perpetually exasperated by everyone's nonsense and likely deserves several medals for patience. Rurik points to a rough sketch on a wall, a crude depiction of Yggdrasil, the world tree, sprawling across the cosmos with branches and roots tangled in ways that make your head ache. Remember, Rurik says, the gods influence everything. The weather, your luck, your food, your goats. Respect them, or you will suffer. You try to remember which gods to thank before meals, which to blame when the rain begins, and which to avoid mentioning near anyone's grandmother. You realize quickly that mistakes are easy to make. Odin seems forgiving. Thor is forgiving if you avoid his hammer. Loki is dangerous in ways that are both subtle and alarming, and Freya will silently judge you into despair if you offend her patience. You make a mental note. Avoid Freya until. You understand her boundaries. As Rurik speaks, the narrator observes, calmly, unemotionally, the subtle interaction between mythology and the natural world. The fjord stretches beneath the morning sun, silver waves glinting in soft light. The wind drifts gently across the settlement, carrying the scent of pine, smoke, and the occasional whiff of fish that escaped the cooking fire. The longhouse behind. You hums with quiet activity. A child giggling, the distant clang of a hammer, the low murmur of conversation. The world, chaotic as it is, moves in rhythm, and mythology threads through it as naturally as smoke through the air. You attempt to engage with Rurik, asking questions in the manner of a curious, respectful student. So if Odin is wise, do we consult him for everything? You inquire, trying to sound like you understand anything. Rurik nods solemnly. Yes, but do not confuse wisdom with kindness. Odin is clever. He will help, yes, but he will also test you. You nod again, unsure what testing entails, but assuming it involves minor disasters and an unfortunate encounter with a goat. Thor is next. Rurik demonstrates proper respect for Thor by lifting a small hammer, likely a symbolic gesture, though you consider that Thor may have historically preferred something more substantial. Strength is not just physical, Rurik explains. It is protection. It is defense. It is also intimidation, if necessary. You nod, making a mental note to maintain a safe distance from anyone wielding large hammers. Then there is Loki, who is introduced through anecdote rather than ritual. Rurik recounts the tale of the trickster god, who once tied someone's horse to the roof, hid a feast and caused general chaos at a gathering of gods. You laugh politely, though the humor is complicated by the realization that Loki would probably have thrown a fish at you if you were present. Chaos seems very much a personal affair. Freya's presence is subtle yet palpable. Rurik mentions her with quiet reverence. She manages the affairs of love, beauty, and sometimes patience, he says, glancing briefly at your expression. Do not test her patience. You make another mental note. Avoid offending Freya. Avoid discussing goats. Avoid overthinking. You file these instructions away under survival tactics. Throughout the morning, you wander with Rurik along the fjord, feeling the wind tug at your clothes, listening to the lapping of waves against wooden pilings, and absorbing the harmony of the natural world. Seabirds wheel overhead, their calls sharp and musical, contrasting beautifully with the gentle rhythm of the water. You notice the light playing across the fjord, reflecting in patterns that remind you of something. something distant and vaguely pleasant, like early morning calm in a modern park, if only the smell of fish were tolerable. Rurik pauses at a small fire, tending a pot of water and fish, and begins to recount a tale. The gods, he says, do not exist only in stories. They exist in the world around you. Every tree, every gust of wind, every wave is touched by them. You nod sagely, considering that, if true, you might owe thanks to Odin for not having fallen into the fjord yet, and to Freya for her patience in allowing you to survive this long. The narrative of the day alternates between instruction and observation. You are asked to recite names of gods, match them to stories, and attempt minor rituals. Clumsy, earnest gestures that are politely tolerated. A small child wanders by, mimicking your motions, adding authenticity and chaos simultaneously. The goat watches. The grandmother remains upright in her corner, silent as always, possibly judging, possibly asleep, possibly both. You decide it is unwise to inquire further. Lunch arrives, more porridge, this time with a few berries that lend a faint tang of hope to an otherwise mundane meal. You sit beside the fire, listening as Rurik recounts the story of Balder, the Aesir, beloved god whose fate is tragic, though your understanding of it is limited to nodding, saying "ah," and avoiding eye contact with the grandmother. The fjord outside glimmers through the smoke-filled window, waves shifting rhythmically, gulls calling overhead. Rurik gestures toward the sky. The weather is Odin's doing today, he says. Be grateful for the calm, or blame Loki if a storm should appear. You nod, storing this information for future reference, fully aware that misattribution could have consequences, though you are unsure whether they are spiritual, social, or entirely hypothetical. In the afternoon, the narrator draws attention to the subtle beauty in the mundane, the wind lifting smoke from the longhouse chimney, the gentle ripple of water against a post, the soft creak of wood underfoot. You feel for a moment a kind of tentative peace, even amidst the chaos of learning gods, dodging goats, and remembering which deity is appropriate to which occasion. You are asked to recount a story. Nervously, you attempt the tale of a miner, fishing misadventure from earlier that morning, embellishing wildly. The child laughs. The goat remains silent, but attentive. Rurik nods, approvingly or politely. It is difficult to discern. Somehow, despite your limited knowledge, you have contributed. Somehow the gods may be watching. The afternoon winds on with further instruction. You are shown how to make small offerings to the gods. A sprinkle of water for Odin, a nod to Thor, a polite smile for Loki, and a careful, respectful silence for Freya. The repetition is soothing. The gestures minor but meaningful, and the rhythm of teaching settles gently around you. The fjord continues its silver shimmer. The wind shifts. The fire crackles softly. Life in the 9th century, chaotic as it is, contains moments of clarity, and you are absorbing them in fits and starts. By evening, you realize that Norse mythology is simultaneously confusing, terrifying, and oddly relatable. The gods embody strengths and weaknesses familiar in human terms, wisdom and folly, strength and stubbornness, trickery and charm, patience and exasperation. You begin to see with cautious amusement how these narratives serve not only to explain the world, but to teach survival in it. For the gods, much like the villagers, reward awareness, attentiveness, and occasionally, sheer luck. The sun dips lower over the fjord. Smoke curls from the longhouses, gulls wheel lazily above, and the water shimmers in slow, lazy waves. You sit beside the fire, reflecting on what you have learned, which gods to thank, which to avoid, and which to approach with caution. You are more knowledgeable than when you awoke that morning, though only slightly. You have swung an axe, held a fish, recited names, and survived without direct injury. Rurik departs to tend other matters, leaving you with a sense of calm authority and mild confusion. You glance out across the fjord once more. Waves lap gently. Against the shore, the wind carries faint scents of pine and sea, and somewhere, far off, a gull cries its eternal judgmental call. The world feels both vast and contained, wild and oddly manageable. You take a slow breath, considering the lessons of the day. The gods are present in the world. The world itself is intricate and beautiful, and you are, improbably, hilariously, part of it. You swing your gaze toward the longhouse, toward the flickering fire, toward the silently judging grandmother, and realize something remarkable. Despite chaos, uncertainty, and the occasional threat of accidental dismemberment, you are surviving. And somehow, in the midst of axes, gods, and gulls, you feel that the 9th century is, if not entirely comprehensible, at least faintly tolerable. You are told that today's adventure will be a short trip along the fjord. The emphasis on short is delivered with a casual nod and a smile that, in retrospect, you understand to mean prepare for mild despair, possibly with wind, and a hint of regret. You nod, attempting to appear enthusiastic, though your stomach has already begun sending nervous signals. The long ship waits at the edge of the settlement. Its sleek wooden frame glints in the morning light, adorned with carvings of serpents, dragons, and creatures whose exact mythological significance is unclear, but unquestionably alarming. The craftsmanship is exquisite. Every plank, every rope, every oar meticulously arranged to allow humans to traverse great distances over a glittering, merciless sea. You marvel at the ingenuity, while simultaneously hoping that nothing will break, capsize, or eject you into the fjord. Boarding the ship proves more difficult than anticipated. The deck rocks beneath your feet, each step producing a sloshing sound that resonates through your boots. You step carefully, trying to match the rhythm of seasoned Vikings, who appear to glide effortlessly across the wood as if it were a solid, unmoving floor. You do not glide. You stumble, regaining balance just in time to avoid catastrophe. Once aboard, you are assigned a position with an oar. You grip it tentatively, feeling the smooth wood beneath your hands and the reassuring weight of it in your palms. The other rowers begin in unison, their movements precise, rhythmic, and surprisingly elegant. You attempt to mimic them. The oar slips, the boat wobbles, and you feel that immediate, vertiginous awareness that comes with realizing the ocean is both vast and unforgiving. Seasickness makes its first subtle appearance. A gentle churning in your stomach escalates quickly, a low rumble warning you of the day ahead. You try to suppress it, breathing carefully, thinking of the shimmering water, the gulls overhead, and the inexplicable trust you have placed in people, wielding axes who promised with cheerful assurance that this would be short. As the longship glides forward, the narrator, calm, detached, and entirely unflappable, draws attention to the beauty of the scene. The fjord stretches endlessly, silver waves glittering under a reluctant sun. Mountains rise sharply from the water's edge, their slopes dotted with pines that sway gently in the morning breeze. The wind carries the scent of salt and pine, of wood and smoke, mingling into a fragrance that is both bracing and vaguely nauseating. You marvel at it anyway, because despite the discomfort, the majesty is undeniable. Your fellow Vikings, meanwhile, engage in conversation. There is laughter, shouting, and the occasional philosophical musing. One man remarks on the nature of the sea, comparing it to the unpredictable whims of Loki, while another meditates on the serenity it offers. You nod at intervals, attempting to appear contemplative, while your stomach produces increasingly urgent reminders of its presence. The oar feels heavier with each stroke. Your arms ache, your back protests, and the rhythm, and though comforting once mastered, initially feels like a minor torment device. You notice the coordinated motion of the rowers, arms pulling, shoulders rotating, backs straining in a delicate ballet of effort and survival. You try to integrate, waving your awkward, mismatched strokes into the pattern. The ship lists slightly with your miscalculated movements. No one seems concerned. You quietly hope this means you are not about to be ejected. Seagulls wheel overhead, their calls sharp, raucous, and occasionally judgmental. You follow one with your eyes, marveling at its effortless flight, wishing secretly that your own capacity for gliding across the deck were half as refined. The wind tousles your hair, lashes at your face, and brings a faint salt taste that is both invigorating and deeply, profoundly unpleasant. You focus on breathing through it, one stroke at a time. Lunch, or what you assume is lunch, is conspicuously absent. You realize with growing alarm that you have brought nothing to eat. The thought lingers. A long sea voyage, exertion, and no sustenance. Your stomach rumbles its disapproval. The gentle reminder that survival may require forward planning, a concept not fully embraced in the 9th century. You consider, fleetingly, the wisdom of Odin and the potential wrath of Freya if you fail. At basic nourishment, seasickness escalates. You grip the edge of the boat, gaze fixed on the horizon, and attempt to convince yourself that the rolling of the waves is rhythmic, calming, and entirely natural. The longship pitches, dips, and rocks. In a manner that might generously be described as playful, you discover muscles you did not know existed. You imagine with mild horror the likelihood of repeating this motion for several hours without proper conditioning or a packed lunch. Somehow, amidst the chaos, camaraderie develops. A fellow rower laughs when you flail, not cruelly, but with warm acceptance. Another offers advice: follow the rhythm, don't fight the waves, and try not to vomit on the boat. You nod. You do not at this moment disagree. Survival, you observe, is often a matter of coordination, humility, and occasionally holding one's stomach with both hands while silently cursing every choice. That led you here. Gradually the panic recedes. You find a steady rhythm. The oar moves in tandem with the others, your grip firm, your arms straining but effective. The waves, once threatening, begin to lull you into a quiet appreciation of the sea's vastness. The gulls call above you. The sunlight glitters off the water in tiny dancing prisms. You are improbably participating in this ballet of motion. You marvel at the craftsmanship of the longship. Every plank, every rope, every carved detail, perfectly suited to cut through water, to glide, to endure. You feel a peculiar sense of admiration for the ingenuity of your Viking hosts. Time stretches. You lose count of hours, minutes, even small bursts of panic. Instead, there is the sea, the swell of water beneath, the wind in your hair, the occasional, distant cry of gulls, the creaking of wood that sings a low, harmonious note as the ship cuts forward. Your muscles ache, but with a steady, predictable rhythm. Your thoughts drift to life, to survival, to small philosophical questions. How far can one drift before regretting everything? How much courage does it take to endure cold, salty wind, a churning stomach, and the quiet judgment of seafaring goats? Rurik, overseeing the voyage, provides gentle instruction, the correct angle of the oar, how to anticipate the wave, how to move with the ship rather than against it. You follow as best you can, discovering slowly that cooperation, patience, and measured effort produce results. You are part of the longship's heartbeat now, a minor, clumsy contribution that nonetheless keeps you afloat, literally and metaphorically. By mid-afternoon, the nausea subsides. Your body adjusts to the rhythm of the waves. The sea, which once seemed intent on throwing you into its depths, now flows beneath you with quiet dignity. Sunlight glints off the water. The wind shifts gently, carrying the scent of salt, pine, and distant forests. Your stomach still protests, but faintly, and the sense of panic is replaced by a calm, almost meditative awareness. The ocean is vast, beautiful, and indifferent to human folly. The longship sails on. You observe the horizon, marveling at the distance, the clarity, the glittering expanse. Your arms ache in a way that is almost satisfying. Your lungs fill with crisp, briny air. You note with dry amusement that you have brought no lunch, yet survive. You note further that historically, the Vikings did this every day and likely considered it a minor inconvenience. You nod respectfully to them in absentia. The evening approaches. Shadows stretch across the fjord. Light reflects off waves in gold-and-silver patterns, undulating with the gentle roll of the ship. Gulls circle lazily. The creak of the longship settles into a comforting rhythm. You have moved from comedic panic to a kind of peaceful maritime awareness. Survival, you realize, is not just about avoiding calamity. It is about finding calm. Amid motion, rhythm amid chaos, and occasionally humor in your own utter incompetence. You glance around the ship. Companions row in silent coordination. The wind touzles hair and clothes. The waves lap with a gentle cadence. You reflect on what you have learned. Rhythm is essential. Humor is a survival skill, and even without lunch you can endure. You are, improbably, part of this vast moving vessel, a small element of Viking ingenuity, endurance, and spectacle. By sunset, the longship turns toward home. The fjord glows in the waning light, waves shimmer, gulls circle once more, and the wind whispers gently through the rigging. You sit quietly, grateful for the calm, amused at the day's misadventures, and mildly horrified at your own survival. You have voyaged far, endured motion, and glimpsed the vastness of the sea. You have somehow survived a day at sea, and in that quiet sunlit moment, with the creak of the longship beneath you and gulls wheeling overhead, you realize something remarkable. The ocean is vast, the Vikings are skilled, and you, improbably, miraculously, are part of it. You wake before dawn, roused not by gentle sunlight or the chirping of birds, but by the distant shouting of men who clearly believe that early morning is best spent expressing enthusiasm for axes in decibels previously considered impossible. You lie in the straw, contemplating your life choices, the chill of the longhouse pressing against you, and the fact that the goat seems mildly satisfied with its dominance of the remaining blankets. The village leader, a man named Harold, who exudes confidence and mild terror in equal measure, announces through the frosty air that it is time for a small raid. He assures you repeatedly, though his tone suggests otherwise, that this is mostly for trade. Aggressive trade, he clarifies. You nod, uncertain if nodding will save your life or merely make you appear compliant. You are handed a helmet, which is clearly intended for someone with a head several sizes larger than your own. It tilts precariously and obstructs peripheral vision, lending you the appearance of a befuddled soldier in a stage play. The sword you are given is primarily decorative, light, unwieldy, and terrifyingly inadequate for actual violence. You consider leaving it behind, but suspect that would be worse than carrying it awkwardly, so you tuck it under your arm like a mildly threatening baguette. Rurik, your mentor from the fjord voyage, pats your shoulder with reassuring force. This is perfectly normal, he says, calm as ever. Historically speaking, it builds character, and if you survive, it makes for a good story. You nod again, storing this statement under survival advice, though you remain unconvinced that character building outweighs potential decapitation. The march to the shore is brisk. Other Vikings sing gleeful songs, chants about burning, looting, and things that, in the interest of self-preservation, you prefer not to imagine in detail. You shuffle along, careful to match the rhythm, hoping that your awkwardness will go unnoticed. Your helmet wobbles alarmingly, your sword clunks against your thigh, and yet somehow you are still upright. For now, boarding the longship is a delicate operation. Waves lap against the hull, the deck is slick with sea spray, and the combination of oversized helmet and decorative sword creates a precarious balance. You step gingerly, imagining the scene from above. A clumsy Viking, teetering between competence and catastrophe, surrounded by determined singing warriors. You consider the artistic merit of this tableau and decide it could be a fine subject for a woodcut in another life, one that does not involve axes. The sea crossing is cold and wet. Water sprays against your face, splashes across your tunic and seeps into boots already too small to begin with. You grit your teeth, counting each wave, each shiver, each distinctly unpleasant gust of wind. The narrator, unbothered by the physical turmoil, explains, calmly, soothingly, that the screaming of gulls overhead is, in fact, a relaxing natural soundtrack. You do not feel relaxed, but you nod politely anyway, as if acknowledging wisdom you may someday appreciate. Hours pass. The longship moves with a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. Your muscles ache from rowing or balancing. It is difficult to distinguish which. The waves rise and fall, carrying the scent of salt and adventure, and the sun, still low in the sky, glints off the water in sharp flashes. You marvel fleetingly at the strange beauty of the ocean, even as your stomach reminds you that you skipped breakfast, lunch, and, perhaps inadvertently, any opportunity for food whatsoever. Eventually, the coastline of a small village appears. It looks suspiciously peaceful. You feel a surge of anxiety. A village this calm must be harboring secrets, traps, or at the very least, people who frown upon armed, singing strangers. Harold gestures toward the shore, and you disembark with cautious optimism, sword held stiffly, helmet wobbling and every sense alert to danger, surprise, or a rogue goat. The pillage begins. Your role, as you quickly discern, is primarily observational. You trip over a barrel near the dock, apologize to everyone, villagers and Vikings alike, and somehow survive the encounter without injury. Others around you engage in the more conventional aspects of raiding, shouting, looting, and heated debates over whether a particularly stubborn goat counts as treasure. You note with dry amusement that the definition of treasure is highly subjective and apparently includes farm animals. Smoke rises from distant chimneys, carried by the wind across the village in curling spirals. The rhythmic clanging of axes, the occasional shout, and the creak of wooden doors all merge into a strange symphony. The narrator, with scholarly detachment, remarks on Viking efficiency, noting that despite appearances, raiding involves careful planning, timing, and the subtle artistry of intimidation. You nod, holding your decorative sword aloft, contributing nothing to efficiency except moral support and occasional awkward clumsiness. At one point, you attempt to lift a barrel, misjudge its weight, and end up rolling it gently down a slope. The barrel collides with a stack of crates, producing a noise that echoes across the village. A villager stares. You bow awkwardly and apologize. Harold claps your shoulder and remarks that initiative counts for something. You file this under survival skills. Hours pass. Loot is gathered. Disputes over the definition of treasure are resolved in favor of those willing to shout loudest, and you observe quietly, noting the practicalities of Viking raiding, timing, coordination, and the necessity of wearing a helmet. That does not fit. You survive minor hazards. A thrown axe narrowly misses you. A goat scampers underfoot, and a particularly belligerent barrel collides with your shin, with minimal injury. Mostly, your contribution consists of staying out of the way, occasionally tripping and nodding appreciatively at others' success. The raid concludes as swiftly as it began. You discover, astonishingly, that you have won a wooden spoon, apparently liberated from some unsuspecting household. You clutch it as one might a trophy, reflecting on the absurdity of the day. Cold, wet, chaotic, terrifying, and yet somehow survivable. The Vikings board the longship once more, their songs now tinged with exhaustion and the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment. The return journey is calmer. The sea has settled into a rhythmic motion. Waves rise and fall gently. The longship creaks, in time with their motion, and gulls wheel lazily overhead. You hold your wooden spoon, reflecting on the lessons of the day. Survival often depends less on skill than on discretion, luck, and the ability to avoid both barrels and belligerent goats. You are tired, damp, and mildly traumatized, but still upright. The sun dips lower in the sky, casting a warm gold across the water. Smoke curls faintly from distant settlements, blending with the scent of salt and pine. The longship glides steadily, the oars dipping in unison, producing a soothing, hypnotic rhythm. You close your eyes briefly, marveling at the improbable fact that despite chaos you are safe, dryish, and largely intact. By the time you return to your home village, the golden light of late afternoon bathes the fjord in soft warmth. The villagers, exhausted and exhilarated, disembark, carrying loot, tales of glory, and a few minor injuries. You step onto solid ground, grateful for the stability beneath your boots, holding the wooden spoon aloft as your own small, ridiculous prize. The longhouse is quiet. Smoke rises lazily from the hearth. Children peek cautiously from the doorway, and the goat seems to have resumed its judgmental observation of human activity. You set your prize down, reflecting on the strange rhythm of Viking life. Panic, chaos, skill, stupidity, survival. The narrator, calm and soothing, notes that even the most aggressive of pillagers eventually return to routine, to hearth, to order, and ultimately, to rest. You sit by the fire, exhausted but alive, listening to the creak of the longship as it rocks gently at its mooring, the lapping of waves against the dock, and the distant calls of gulls returning to roost. The world is calm, peaceful, and just slightly absurd. You have survived another day as a Viking, mostly by staying out of everyone's way, tripping over obstacles and clutching a wooden spoon as though it were a talisman. And in the quiet after chaos, as firelight flickers across the walls and the goat curls up in a corner, you recognize the subtle truth of Viking life. Even pillagers eventually go home. Even raiders eventually pause. Even those thrust into chaos, unprepared, and carrying decorative swords can miraculously survive. The oars creak softly in your mind's ear. Waves lap at the shore. Smoke rises in lazy spirals. And for the first time today, you feel a measure of peace. You return to the village, oddly proud of surviving the pillage in one piece, and discover, to your mild surprise, that you are considered a hero, or at least not drowned. Your contribution, limited to tripping over barrels, holding a wooden spoon and occasionally waving a sword with decorative enthusiasm, seems to count for something. The village leader, Harold, slaps you on the back with the sort of force that leaves you briefly reconsidering your spine's structural integrity. "You have proven yourself," he announces, tone exultant. You nod politely, aware that historically speaking, proving oneself often involved minimal actual heroism and mostly a lack of accidental fatalities. A feast is declared. The longhouse is transformed into a bustling, chaotic celebration. Smoke curls from the hearth, mingling with the aroma of roasted meats and freshly baked bread. The flicker of firelight dances across wooden beams, casting shadows that move like playful specters over the faces of villagers, goats, and the perpetually silent grandmother. Your senses are immediately assaulted with warmth, light, and sound, a pleasing, overwhelming combination that is somehow both exhilarating and exhausting. Roasted meats dominate the tables. Boar, presumably wild, lies on a spit, rotating slowly over the fire, its skin crisping and glistening. Chickens, fish, and mysterious game are arranged on wooden platters, aromatic juices dripping into bowls of thick, slightly congealed sauce. The scent of spices, or perhaps smoke, mingles with the faintly sour tang of ale. You attempt to inhale politely, only to realize that your nostrils are simultaneously assaulted and seduced by every element in the room. Mugs clink in enthusiastic, if imprecise, toasts. Villagers shout their approval, raise their arms, and gesture wildly, spilling some portion of ale in the process. The goat watches, unimpressed, possibly judging the human capacity for mess and merriment. Children weave between legs, occasionally bumping into your chair or tugging at your sleeve, and you offer polite, distracted smiles, as if this is part of some intricate social dance that you are gradually beginning to understand. Songs begin. Voices rise in unison, some harmonizing, some attempting it and failing spectacularly. A man beats a drum with the sort of dedication usually reserved for military training, producing a rhythm that is at once grounding and mildly terrifying. You tap a finger along the table, unsure if this is the correct form of accompaniment. The narrator notes with calm amusement that music in the Viking world serves multiple purposes: morale, celebration, intimidation, and occasionally the encouragement of minor chaos. You nod, appreciating the subtle insight while spilling a small portion of ale down your tunic. Dancing follows. Villagers pair off, forming clumsy circles, hopping and stomping in patterns that appear to the untrained eye accidental. A child attempts to lead you in a simple jig. You follow with the sort of hesitant enthusiasm that borders on panic. Your feet, previously trained in walking, rowing, and avoiding barrels, struggle with the concept of coordinated motion. You stumble twice, narrowly avoiding collision with Harold, and are subtly encouraged to persist. You do, mostly out of social necessity and the faint hope of being considered moderately competent. Throughout the evening, the narrator draws attention to the sensory richness of the feast. The fire crackles and pops, casting warmth that contrasts sharply with the crisp night air outside. Shadows flicker over the walls, creating a living tapestry of movement and light. The scent of roasted meat, smoke, ale, and the occasional whiff of goat creates a complex, layered olfactory experience. You breathe it all in, appreciating that survival involves more than mere physical endurance. It is also about immersion in the community, participation in rituals, and learning to tolerate. The goat's critical gaze. Food is consumed with vigorous delight. You manage a plate, balancing portions of boar bread and a slightly suspect vegetable that may or may not be edible. Ale flows freely, the sound of mugs clanging, punctuating laughter, song, and shouted toasts. You attempt conversation, nodding sagely at stories of heroic deeds, narrow escapes, and minor misunderstandings that apparently qualify as legend. Occasionally you interject with mild commentary, generating polite laughter or polite tolerance from your audience. The narrator observes with calm detachment that feasts serve as both celebration and instruction. They reinforce social bonds, assert hierarchies, and subtly communicate expectations. You nod, chewing thoughtfully, realizing that part of surviving as a Viking involves mastering not just axes, oars, or mythology, but also the delicate art of social navigation. This includes knowing when to speak, when to listen, when to clap, and importantly, when to avoid making eye contact with Bjorn, who sits nearby with the faintest trace of judgment in his gaze. As the night progresses, stories are told around the fire. Some recount daring exploits on the fjord, others detail minor skirmishes with goats or barrels, and a few involve the gods themselves, inserted with the casual reverence that marks true belief. You listen attentively, occasionally nodding, occasionally glancing at your wooden spoon, your trophy from the pillage, which sits on the table as a quiet reminder of the day's improbable victories. Laughter echoes through the longhouse, warm and contagious. You notice the subtle interactions between villagers. The grandmother finally shifts her position, observing with quiet satisfaction. The children collapse into giggles. The goats remain alert, judging every movement with silent authority. The narrator comments dryly that Viking efficiency extends even into festivity. Despite appearances, the chaos is deliberate, ritualized, and culturally significant. You nod, pretending to fully understand while secretly marveling at the organizational brilliance that allows such disorder to function seamlessly. Music, song, and dance continue in a gentle rhythm. Ale flows, plates are replenished, and the fire burns steadily, casting comforting warmth over the longhouse. You sip cautiously, noting the subtle interplay of flavors, the sharp tang of roasted meat, the mild bitterness of ale, and the occasional sweetness of honeyed bread. Each taste reinforces your awareness of the community's interconnectedness, food, labor, celebration, and survival, entwined in a complex, aromatic tapestry. By the middle of the evening, exhaustion begins to set in. You lean back slightly, appreciating the comfort of a wooden chair, the gentle warmth of the fire, and the collective rhythm of the room. Laughter, conversation, clinking mugs, and the occasional hoofed shuffle of the goat. The narrator highlights the human element, noting that feasts provide a reprieve from the harshness of life, a space where survival is celebrated, where stories are shared, and where even the most awkward participant, yourself, for example, is absorbed into the communal rhythm. You reflect on the day, the pillage, the seasickness, the near drowning, and the triumphant return to hearth and celebration. Each moment, terrifying, absurd, or unexpectedly beautiful, contributes to your understanding of Viking life. Survival involves skill, observation, humor, and occasionally, the grace to trip over a barrel without collapsing social cohesion. You realize with mild astonishment that despite chaos, cold, and occasional danger, there is comfort in routine, warmth in community, and meaning in shared experience. The evening winds down, the fire flickers more softly, casting long, gentle shadows across the walls. Music slows, laughter becomes subdued, and the clinking of mugs transitions into the occasional sigh of contentment. Children curl up near their parents, goats settle into corners, and even the grandmother seems to relax, eyes half closed but attentive. You sip a final mouthful of ale, feeling warmth and satisfaction, and quietly acknowledge your improbable success in navigating the complexities of Viking social life. As night deepens, the longhouse settles into a comforting rhythm. The crackle of the fire, the occasional murmur of conversation, and the soft shuffle of feet create a gentle, enveloping cadence. You feel a profound sense of belonging, however precarious, and marvel that survival, once thought purely physical, is also emotional, communal, and ritualistic. You glance at your wooden spoon, a silent testament to resilience, humor, and the strange grace that has allowed you to endure another day in the 9th century. The feast, chaotic and fragrant, absurd and deeply satisfying, has provided more than nourishment. It has offered a glimpse into the heart of Viking life, a lesson in endurance, and a reminder that community, warmth, and shared celebration are as vital as axes, oars, and mythology. And as you settle into the longhouse, full, tired, and oddly content, the narrator's voice observes gently, even amidst chaos, even after pillages and long days at sea, there is comfort. There is warmth. There is the gentle rhythm of firelight, the quiet camaraderie of shared meals, and the reassuring knowledge that tomorrow, as always, will bring more challenges, and perhaps more absurd, improbable triumphs. The feast winds down with the inevitability of tides. Laughter, songs, and the occasional misplaced mug give way to a quieter rhythm. The longhouse feels expansive, filled now with the gentle hum of contentment rather than the wild chaos of earlier. Smoke rises lazily from the hearth, curling upward in delicate spirals, and the fire's glow softens, casting the room in warm, amber shadows that stretch across walls, beams, and the perpetually judgmental goat. You note with mild amusement that even the goat seems ready to sleep, which is a testament to the subtle art of Viking exhaustion. You rise reluctantly, muscles stiff from hours of standing, dancing, and occasionally tripping over barrels or small children. The air outside carries the crisp bite of the fjord's night, cold but bracing, mingling with the faint lingering scent of roasted meats and pine smoke. Stepping out, you feel the wind tug gently at your clothes, a reminder of the world beyond. The warmth of the longhouse, vast, quiet, and beautifully indifferent. The journey back to your own quarters is simple, though your steps are slow. Each creaking floorboard, each distant murmur of villagers settling for the night, emphasizes the contrast between the day's chaos and the serenity now descending upon the settlement. You pass familiar sights, the longships resting in the harbor, their hulls reflecting faint glimmers of moonlight, a stray goat nosing a leftover scrap of bread, and the grandmother, upright as ever, though her eyes are closed in uncharacteristic repose. You wonder, fleetingly, whether she has always been this still, or if the day's events have simply lulled even her vigilance into temporary sleep. Within your longhouse, you find your straw bed, already modestly prepared with furs and blankets. You settle onto it with a sigh that acknowledges both fatigue and relief. The straw is itchy, the furs rough in places, but the combination is oddly comforting, a tactile reminder of survival, warmth, and the simple pleasure of a space to call your own, however rudimentary. The helmet and decorative sword, relics of the day's adventures, lie discarded nearby, their purpose temporarily concluded. You glance at the wooden spoon, your absurd prize from the raid, and allow a small, private smile. Somehow, amid chaos, discomfort, and occasional existential terror, you have persisted. Outside, the wind whispers through the settlement, trees sway gently, their pine needles rustling softly. The fjord, now quiet, reflects the faint light of the moon in delicate, shimmering patterns. Waves lap against the shore with a slow, hypnotic cadence, each ripple a gentle reminder of the vastness of the world and your small, remarkable presence within it. You imagine the gulls roosting somewhere unseen, their calls replaced by the subtle harmony of nocturnal life. The night air is sharp, tinged with salt, pine, and the faint warmth of lingering hearth smoke, a combination that feels both elemental and reassuring. As you curl under the furs, the narrator reflects gently on the simplicity and profundity of life here. Hard work defines existence. Lifting oars, swinging axes, tending fires, raising livestock, navigating seas, both literal and social. Courage is constant, though it often manifests subtly, in maintaining balance on a longship, in holding a decorative sword without panicking, or in surviving another day without being eaten by a goat or worse, insulted by a furious villager. Peace, when it comes, is earned, and it arrives with the quiet dignity of a fjord at night, untouched by the day's chaos. You notice in the dim glow the faint shimmer of stars through the small window. Each one twinkles above the darkened sea, indifferent to human concerns, yet somehow intimate in their presence. You think of the gods, Odin, Thor, Loki, Freya, wondering how they perceive this nocturnal world. Perhaps even Odin sleeps sometimes, turning his one eye toward the cosmos with quiet contemplation, leaving judgment and intervention for the day. The thought is oddly comforting, suggesting that even those accustomed to vast knowledge and power may seek reprieve from constant vigilance. The longhouse settles into a deeper calm. Muffled snores emerge from corners, punctuated by the occasional creak of wood adjusting to the night's chill. The fire in the hearth crackles softly, its glow painting delicate, shifting patterns across furs and beams. The goat curls tightly, its eyes half closed, while the grandmother remains upright but serene, a silent testament to endurance and stoic patience. You nestle further under the furs, feeling the texture of wool against skin, the reassuring weight of layered blankets, and the subtle warmth radiating from the hearth. Your thoughts wander to the day's events, the morning voyage, the pillage, the feast. Each memory is vivid, the chaos, the humor, the minor triumphs and frequent embarrassments, yet they now blend into a gentle tapestry of lived experience. You consider how, in this world, survival intertwines with community, ritual and resilience. Even in discomfort or fear, there is beauty. The gleaming fjord, the rhythmic creak of ships, the laughter of companions, and the warmth of firelight in a cold, expansive world. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, rustling leaves and sending faint ripples across the fjord's surface. You hear it clearly, yet it is not alarming. It is simply present, a reminder of the natural world's constancy and indifference. You inhale, drawing in the crisp, briny air, noting how it mingles with the lingering sense of hearth and pine. Your body, exhausted yet alert, responds with small shifts, a stretch of the back, a flex of fingers, a settling into the comforting mound of furs. Each sensation anchors you, a subtle recognition of life, endurance, and the strange satisfaction of having survived and mostly intact another day as a Viking. Memories of the pillage intrude briefly, humorous in their absurdity, tripping over barrels, brandishing a decorative sword with vague menace, clutching the wooden spoon like a trophy. You allow a quiet smile, acknowledging that humor, however dry or subtle, is as essential to survival as courage or skill. The longship's rhythmic motion, the fjord's gentle sway, and the night's tranquil air converge to produce a calm awareness. Chaos has ended, and now there is quiet. You consider the stars again. Each one glimmers with a sharp, distant light, a reminder of constancy, endurance, and perspective. What seems vast, dangerous, or incomprehensible by day is softened at night, revealing patterns and rhythms that are at once reassuring and humbling. You imagine the gods observing, distant yet attentive, perhaps amused by your small, fumbling efforts, or perhaps indifferent. Either way, their presence feels oddly comforting, a subtle acknowledgement that even the mighty may rest. The longhouse itself seems to breathe with the night. Wood expands and contracts softly, furs shift as occupants adjust, and the hearth embers sigh in low, crackling murmurs. Every sound is gentle, natural, and rhythmic, creating an enveloping sense of security and continuity. You lie beneath the furs, feeling the texture of layered wool, the faint heat of embers, and the subtle weight of blankets, pressing you gently towards stillness. In these moments, humor softens into reflection. The day's absurdities, the clumsy pillage, the misfiring axes, the decorative sword, become part of a broader narrative, a story of survival, community, and the small victories that define life in a harsh, demanding world. You acknowledge that courage is often measured not by grand feats, but by enduring discomfort, persisting through chaos, and maintaining dignity amidst absurdity. The wind outside carries faint echoes of the fjord's movement, a gentle lull of water against shore and hull. You feel the rhythm slow and persistent, like the pulse of the world itself. Muscles unclench, breathing steadies, and a calm awareness settles over you. You are here, alive, present, and improbably unscathed. The narrator's voice, calm and reflective, observes this quietly, noting that even amid hardship there is room for wonder, amusement, and subtle joy. You shift slightly beneath the furs, nestling deeper, aware of the textures, temperatures, and sounds around you. Each element contributes to the night's comfort: the faintly abrasive straw, the soft furs, the lingering warmth of fire, the scent of pine and hearth, the distant lapping of water. You feel grounded, connected, and quietly triumphant in the simple fact of continued survival. The stars continue to glitter overhead, cold and distant, yet somehow intimately present. You reflect that life, even in the 9th century, is a balance of work, courage, and fleeting beauty. You consider how each day, filled with absurdity, danger, and minor triumphs, contributes to a slow understanding of the world. That rhythm, observation, humor, and presence matter as much as skill, strength, or divine favor. The longhouse settles fully into night. Shadows deepen, embers fade to soft glows, and even the goat has succumbed to slumber. You nestle further under the furs, muscles loosening, mind quieting, aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every gentle creak of wood. The world is simple, elemental, and infinite. You are small within it, but present, alive, remarkably intact. Outside, the wind shifts once more, rustling trees and carrying a faint salt tang from the fjord. Waves lap softly at shore, the rhythmic sound blending with the quiet murmurs of the village. You focus on this cadence, on the gentle oscillation of water, the soft sigh of wind, the faint crackle of embers. Each sensation draws you deeper into reflection, into awareness of survival, absurdity, and the enduring beauty of the world. You think finally of tomorrow, of longships, oars, axes, goats, and feasts. But for now, in this moment, there is only calm, warmth, and quiet observation. Even Odin, you imagine with gentle humor, may take comfort in such nights. Even gods require pause, even amidst chaos, even while watching mortals stumble through life with wooden spoons, decorative swords, and improbable resilience. And so, in the cold night beneath firs, within the quiet longhouse, listening to wind, waves, and hearth, you exist simply, a small, absurd, enduring part of the world, alive and quietly triumphant in your improbable survival. You wake, or at least partially rouse, to the gentle, stubborn light of dawn creeping through the cracks in your longhouse walls. The fire has burned low, embers glowing faintly, as if reluctant to surrender their warmth to the chill of morning. You stretch, a bit stiff from the previous day's exercises in pillaging, feasting, and occasionally dodging barrels, and marvel at the subtle realization that you are alive, intact, and still technically uninjured beyond minor abrasions, bruises, and a suspicion that the goat is judging you for your continued survival. The longhouse is quiet, save for the low murmur of villagers stirring, the occasional squeak of a goat adjusting position, and the almost imperceptible crackle of the fire as it begins to surrender its last heat to the cool air. You inhale the scent of smoldering wood and pine filling your nostrils, mingling with the faint tang of salt that drifts in from the fjord. It is a simple combination, elemental yet profoundly comforting, a reminder that the world continues, indifferent to your minor catastrophes, yet beautiful in its constancy. You sit up slowly, stretching your arms in a gesture that could be mistaken for heroism if observed at the correct angle. Memories of the day, the pillage, the feasts, the awkward rowing, the ridiculous wooden spoon, drift through your mind like gentle waves. Each recollection is tinged with absurdity, danger, and the faint hum of disbelief that you have survived, mostly by luck, occasional dexterity, and an uncanny ability to stay out of the way. The narrator, calm and lightly amused, notes that survival is as much about discretion as it is about strength or skill. You nod to yourself, silently grateful for this gentle truth. You consider what it means in practical terms to have become a Viking. There is no certificate, no badge, no ceremony beyond the informal nods of peers and the occasional clink of ale mugs. It is a quiet internal acknowledgement that you have endured. You have faced cold, confusion, and chaos, and you have emerged mostly unscathed, The narrator, in the dry tone you have come to trust, congratulates you. You've done it, you're officially a Viking. All it took was frostbite, fear, and 47 bowls of porridge. You allow a small, private smile, appreciating the understatement and the subtle mockery inherent in the statement. Breakfast, if it can be called that, consists of porridge once more. Thick, bland, and likely designed to test both patience and tolerance, it is consumed with quiet determination. You eat slowly, savoring each spoonful in a meditative fashion, noting the texture, the faint saltiness, and the way it warms your stomach against the chill of the morning. Around you, villagers begin their routines, tending to animals, stoking fires, and preparing the longships for whatever trivial chaos the day may bring. You watch, absorbing both the details and the rhythm, and marvel at the ordinary heroism in such daily persistence. By mid-morning, you venture outside. The fjord stretches wide, calm and glittering in the pale light. Waves lap gently against the shore, the water reflecting the sky in a shifting palette of silver and grey. A gull cries overhead, then another, their calls mingling with the faint clatter of tools in distant yards. The wind carries the briny tang of the sea, the crisp scent of pine, and the faint sweetness of lingering smoke from fires now mostly extinguished. Each inhale feels grounding, anchoring you to the world with a quiet, steady rhythm. You wander among your fellow villagers, noting their efficiency, their laughter, the subtle hierarchies and rituals that govern life here. Children run with reckless energy, goats graze thoughtfully, and the grandmother, and still upright, still silent, observes with the faintest hint of approval. You exchange nods, half smiles, and the occasional word, participating in the unspoken social dance that defines the settlement. There is comfort here, not in grandeur, but in the predictability, in the warmth of hearth and companionship, and in the small victories that sustain daily life. The narrator interjects occasionally, highlighting lessons learned from your improbable immersion. Bravery is as much about endurance as it is about feats of strength. Boredom is not absence, but the calm between storms. And the cold, literal and metaphorical, is a constant teacher of resilience. You reflect on each, noting the quiet satisfaction in recognizing that survival does not always require heroism, only presence, patience, and occasionally a sharp awareness of goats, barrels, and slightly unhinged villagers. Time passes gently. The sun climbs higher, illuminating the fjord with bright clarity, revealing every ripple, glint, and shadow. You consider the longship, resting patiently in the harbor, its wooden hull a testament to craftsmanship and endurance. The oars, once tools of labor and chaos, now sit idle, echoing the quiet rhythm of the world at rest. You run a hand along the smooth wood, appreciating its solidity, imagining the miles it has traversed, and noting with wry amusement that it has borne you through absurdity, mild terror, and occasional triumph. Lunch, or the second course of porridge, depending on one's definition, arrives. You consume it with the same meditative focus as breakfast, appreciating warmth, texture, and sustenance, all delivered with an air of ritualistic inevitability. The narrator remarks gently that sustenance is more than nutrition here. It is tradition, cohesion, and comfort, binding the community in small repeated acts that anchor the spirit as firmly as they nourish the body. You nod, swallowing thoughtfully, and acknowledge that even this simple routine, repeated endlessly, carries weight and meaning far beyond its apparent simplicity. Afternoon drifts slowly into evening. Shadows lengthen across the village, dancing lightly over walls, longships, and the quiet fjord beyond. You find a place near the water, seated on a small rise, watching the gentle shimmer of waves, the subtle patterns of light on moving water, and the occasional gull skimming the surface. The narrator remarks that there is a profound calm in observing such patterns, that attention to simple beauty, the shimmer of the sea, the rustle of trees, the play of light on water, is itself a form of meditation and a subtle triumph of endurance. You nod again, letting the observation settle, appreciating the quiet poetry of existence. As twilight approaches, the village grows quieter. Fires are lit again, smaller than during the feast, their warmth drawing people close in, shared comfort. You move toward the longhouse, feeling the weight of furs, the chill of the evening air, and the subtle satisfaction of completing yet another day without catastrophe. The narrator notes, lightly, that even the most minor accomplishments, keeping one's balance, surviving another meal, maintaining a wooden spoon as a trophy, are worthy of recognition. You consider this wisdom, storing it carefully in the mind's slow, deliberate ledger. Dinner is simple, nourishing, and imbued with the quiet companionship of those around you. Conversation drifts gently, laughter softens into smiles, and the longhouse settles into a steady rhythm. Crackling fire, murmured voices, the faint shuffle of feet and furs. You eat slowly, reflecting on the absurdity, danger, and improbable beauty of the preceding days. You consider the lessons of survival, observation, discretion, humor, patience, and the courage to persist through discomfort and mild indignity. Night deepens. The fire dims to embers, glowing faintly as if reluctant to surrender its last warmth. Outside, the fjord hums softly, water moving with gentle, hypnotic rhythm. The wind rustles leaves, sways trees, and carries the faint tang of salt. From the sea, you curl under furs, feeling the textures, temperatures, and gentle weight of layered blankets. Your body relaxes, every muscle unwinding, every breath deepening, every heartbeat marking survival and presence. The narrator reflects, dryly but fondly, that you have done it. Frostbite survived, fear endured, 47 bowls of porridge consumed, and social navigation achieved with only minor embarrassment. You have been tested by cold chaos and absurdity, and you have emerged, if not heroic, then undeniably persistent. You are officially a Viking, the narrator intones, voice calm and approving. You consider the statement, allowing a small private smile at its understated absurd truth. Outside, the night is complete. Stars glimmer coldly yet beautifully over the fjord, casting pale light across water and village. Waves lap gently, the rhythm steady and comforting. Smoke rises lazily from distant fires, mingling with pine, salt, and the faint warmth of hearth. Every element combines into a harmonious whole. Sound, scent, texture, and light, forming a gentle chorus of peace, endurance, and belonging. You settle fully beneath the furs, muscles relaxed, senses attuned to the quiet world around you. The goat snores softly in a corner, the grandmother remains still yet dignified, and the village hums in a rhythm of survival and simple contentment. You clutch, or merely acknowledge, your wooden spoon, a symbol of improbable triumph, absurdity, and continuity. It rests beside you as a silent testament to persistence, humor, and quiet courage. Time becomes fluid. The wind, the waves, the soft crackle of embers, and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures merge into a gentle, enveloping rhythm. You exist simply, alive, absurdly intact, and quietly triumphant. The narrator observes, with calm delight, that survival is rarely spectacular, yet its quiet victories, endurance, humor, belonging, are profound in their subtlety. And so, with fire fading, sea humming softly, and the night complete, you lie beneath furs, wrapped in warmth and reflection. The world continues, indifferent yet beautiful, chaotic yet comforting, vast yet intimate. You are a part of it, absurd, resilient and present. You have survived technically, you have endured improbably. You have in your own peculiar way become a Viking. The longhouse settles into silence, the fjord murmurs, and the night stretches gently over the world. You close your eyes, the wooden spoon beside you, the faint warmth of embers against your skin, and allow the gentle rhythm of life, wind, water, fire, and shared humanity, to carry you into rest. It is enough. It is complete. It is Viking life in all its absurd, beautiful, enduring glory.